Even in the offseason, these have become must-sees for Oklahoma fans. We're talking about our weekly Oklahoma Sooners live show right here at the Voice of College Football OU, coming your way every Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time. And again, the moves are coming fast and furious and have been since Lincoln Riley stepped away and went to USC. And, of course, Brent Venables stepped up and has really taken hold of the 22 recruiting class, transfer portal acquisitions, and on into 2023. So much to talk about here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate everybody being here. And as I stated off the top, these are must-see live shows. And for many of you, they've become just that. So we appreciate the increased activity and traffic and viewership and participation from all of you. Please leave your comments and your questions there in the live chat. Of course, this all happens because of my guy, Jason Ray from Last Word on College Football. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing great, Mark. Doing great. Thanks for having me on, as always.
Of course. I think basically what it comes down to is you having me on. So I appreciate you having me on for these Oklahoma shows. You could do these all by yourself, blindfolded. All right. Well, Jason, we're going to hit you up with another transfer portal acquisition here, coming via a Big 12 rival in TCU and an offensive lineman, Tyler Guyton.
Yeah, no, this was a guy, Mark, that Oklahoma was in on a couple of weeks ago. Had a bevy of visits at the transfer portal at Oklahoma. He was a guy that was a little bit under the radar in terms of some of the guys that were on campus. But yeah, I think just tremendous size that you would look for as a kind of a prototypical left tackle. I think he's 6'7", like 315, 320. So, I mean, left tackle or right tackle. I mean, when you think about it from a blindside perspective, more for the right tackle side with Dylan Gabriel there. But yeah, no, I think it's a really good pickup for Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma understands. I think there's three areas, Mark, that Oklahoma has really addressed through the transfer portal. Offensive line here, defensive line, and then the defensive secondary as well. Obviously, the quarterback to an extent as well. But those are the areas that I think Brent Venables and the staff really took an eye on very, 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 very early in the process, knowing, okay, we got to bolster some of that talent based on some of the kids that were leaving the program, and just basically some of the the lack of maybe talent or the lack of depth that they had in the secondary and the defensive line, specifically with the three guys that are leaving the program this year, that Oklahoma won't have the luxury of next year. So yeah, good addition for Oklahoma just in terms of size, but they've got a fair amount of transition there within the offensive line. So I think it'll be interesting to see what that offensive line looks like this upcoming season, as well with some of the other folks that have left the program.
So this Tyler Guyton seems to be a pretty athletic offensive lineman. I'm looking at some information provided by Sooner Scoop that says that he started at H-back against Oklahoma last year, caught a 6-yard touchdown pass against Iowa State, and actually didn't necessarily split time, but pretty significant playing time at H-back. And Houston seems to have been the program that was most in the running for his services besides Oklahoma. Jason, when looking at the offensive line, there was so much attention given to the quarterback position. Spencer Rattler, of course, the Heisman favorite, and him looked upon as the guy that was going to lead this team to a national championship. And then he played okay, but not up to expectations. Caleb Williams comes in, shows a flash. Of course, the Texas comeback, first and foremost, he pretty much fulfilled what you would have expected from a guy playing his first football. He was everything advertised. Not that he didn't have his issues, especially in the Baylor game, but he had a great first season. But the quarterback position just looked upon as, okay, this is what sent this team downhill early in the season. Would offensive line be that positional unit that you think underachieved more than any other unit and was the cause of this team not necessarily meeting expectations?
Yeah, I think particularly on the offensive side of the ball, definitely, Mark. I think that's a fair point to say, and I think it's come to light. I think the strength and conditioning is was I think that was perceived, Mark, across the program as being a little bit of a challenge where Oklahoma wasn't really where they needed to be. And I think with Jerry Schmidt coming in and just how specifically the offensive line has tested out early on, shows that they are definitely not where they need to be. I think it's kind of funny. There's been a couple of um, Oklahoma players. Andrew Rame, it was one of them, and then uh, the other one's escaping me right now. Sorry, but talking about the off season kind of not necessarily conditioning, but the training and stuff workouts that they've started to go through now. Gabe Eichert and Teddy Lehman, really good stuff. Have a lot of insight into the program. Have talked a lot about some of the horror stories of Jerry Schmidt's workouts back when they were playing and stuff like that. Uh, and what they said was interesting is through the time through the time of the strength and conditioning program through Riley, they've never heard one horror story. And so that just kind of speaks volumes to where Oklahoma basically wasn't where they weren't. So anyways, Andrew there was a text conversation between him and his mom that kind of got leaked on Twitter that talked about, just said it's not even a comparison on how tough, on how difficult and how hard the strength and conditioning workouts have been thus far through a couple of weeks. So Mark, I think that's a big part of what Oklahoma has is going to see the benefit of. I think in 2022 is much a much stronger and a much more elusive offensive line than we saw last year. And I think another part of it is the schemes that Riley ran from a running game perspective were very complicated. Some that weren't even ran at the next level, just due to their complication. And so I think Jeff Lebby will simplify that a lot, and I think you'll see a much improved offensive line. I mean, it remains to be seen exactly how improved, because they have lost a couple of guys off of that line, but I think the addition of Schmidt is going to give dividends for this team in terms of what this 2022 offensive line could potentially look like, Mark.
I may not put this in necessarily the most appropriate or best terms, but you got to be a little crazy to love to play football. So it's not necessarily a fun sport all the time. Like baseball, basketball, they're pretty much the same sport on game day than they were when you were at practice all week. Football, you have to either just love hitting people and running into people, because again, baseball, everybody comes to bat, everybody touches the ball, everybody throws it, catches it. Basketball, even if you're the post guy who's just a rebounder and a grinder, you're still going to get your hands on the basketball. You get to to play with the ball of the sport. Football, hey, unless you're a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, you're out there hitting people. You're pursuing, you're trying to shed block. You're doing things that aren't necessarily fun to the average person. Right. The average person would want to be the wide receiver catching touchdown passes, or the quarterback who's throwing everything. But the majority of positions out there, football practice is not necessarily fun for, again, the average sane person. It is a grind. Mm-hmm. So if you're not hearing complaints, but there's still a lot of guys that can be really good at it and love game day and hate the workouts, and just they're talented enough and they understand the final goal is worth it, that they put themselves through it. But if you're not hearing complaints about conditioning, then you're probably not driving these guys as hard as you should be.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And like I said, Mark, I think this has been growing as a little bit of a concern within the program over the last couple of years. And I think I think it proved to be the case this year on both lines of scrimmage, offense and defensive line. Specifically, the defensive line got pushed around from time to time. A lot of teams had success really just running the ball right up the middle at Oklahoma. So I can guarantee you between Schmidt and Venables, that's something. Toughness, I think, and strength is something that you're not going to see be a huge problem really at the level that it is. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I think in football lore, you learn to complain about off-season workouts. You learn to complain about conditioning because, I think there's a certain aspect of it that they complain about. I know but I think come come September, they're happy that they went through it, obviously, because it sets them up to be where they need to be from a successful perspective on Saturdays.
I was out playing flag football in a league until I was 42, 43 years old. I loved it, but that's all throwing and catching. When I was playing in high school and I'm playing cornerback and, I'm having pulling guards truck me and stomp on
Mhm.
my head because they're 60 pounds heavier than me. That's not fun. I didn't have fun practicing football or going through two-a-days. It's just to get prepared to play the sport well. It's not necessarily fun for most people. Again, if you're a little crazy, if you're I don't know who to put in that category of just a maniac, a Chris Spielman that just loves football and I can't get enough of it, then that's amazing. So that's pretty much an answer, Justin, to your question about the offensive line comparison between last year and this year's. Before we get to the news of the week and another bullet point, Brandon's asking about Kamari Wheaton, who, of course, at this point would be a bit of a fantasy wish hope that he would decommit from Alabama. But we've got Brandon asking about the chances of Wheaton and Oklahoma.
So, Mark, this is a very, very bizarre situation. So, obviously, I know most people here watching know the story of Kamar Wheaton was a long time commit for not necessarily a commit, but really a strong lean to Oklahoma. And last year's recruiting cycle ended up late going to Alabama. And so he hasn't officially hit the portal. But the strange thing about this story, Mark, is that he's just picked up and left Alabama. So essentially, from what I understand, he no communication with the coaches, no communication. He just did not enroll in the he just didn't enroll in the spring semester here, and has packed up and left. So it's a thought that he's going to be in the transfer portal, but he hasn't officially landed there yet. So, I don't know the way that he left would cause me a little bit of concern. If I was Oklahoma looking at this kid. So, I think at the end of the day, running back is a position where you can probably never have enough depth. Oklahoma has been through this a couple of situations where they needed to have more depth than they needed. So if he's a kid that if he's a kid that Oklahoma feels strongly about and wants to kind of take a chance and take an opportunity on, then sure. But I think Oklahoma probably likes where they're at. From a running back perspective, based on who they have coming back and who they've gotten through. Gavin Sawchuk is a guy. Javante Barnes is another guy. Barnes is actually a guy that's actually in the spring. He's an early enrollee, along with Marcus Major as well. So those are the guys that Oklahoma has, and then they've got the couple of Eric Gray's also in the mix, and then a couple of walk-ons that they potentially we're going to have to look at playing last year. So interesting situation, but I think Oklahoma would entertain it if they felt like kind of heard the story, understand the story a little bit on why he did or is leaving Alabama and what that situation was about.
Yeah, a number of people certainly go through experiences in life where they do dumb, irresponsible things and it gets corrected and they learn from it and grow and mature. But still, yeah, that needs to be looked into. because that's definitely it's a red flag. That doesn't mean it's the end of the world. That doesn't mean he can't change and mature. And that doesn't mean that there weren't certain circumstances. But obviously, regardless of the circumstances, he was irresponsible in not notifying the coaches and going through the proper channels to leave the University of Alabama. Kamar Wheaton, I think I mispronounced his name the first time I threw it out there. I definitely know who that is, but haven't seen or said his name in so long. Yes, Kamar Wheaton, one-time Alabama commit. Obviously, Oklahoma was right there, 1-2 in the running for his commitment with Alabama. And who knows about that possibility. Got Jason Ray here from Last Word on College Football. Please go to Last Word on College Football for your, I think it's pretty obvious, your college football needs. To check out all the teams covered across the map. Jason's work on Oklahoma in particular. But again, Last Word on College Football, very good to us here at the Voice of College Football with Jason, Kevin McGuffey, Tony Saragusa, and others doing a great job at Last Word on College Football. And of course, if you haven't subscribed here, we would ask that you would please do that. Subscribe, hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. We are here every Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time. But please forgive us. Sometimes we have to change that because of scheduling conflicts and other responsibilities and obligations. So that's why it's important to hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live and upload new content. All right. Jackson Arnold, 2023 quarterback, highly, highly ranked. And Brent Venables was able to get a commitment there.
Yeah, so this is big, obviously for the 2023 cycle. As you mentioned, Oklahoma had lost out, obviously on Malachi Nelson, who was a one-time commit. Obviously flipped to USC. Really not very a couple of days, honestly, Mark, after after Lincoln Riley made his announcement. So obviously Oklahoma was in the market for a 23 guy, and I'm of the opinion that you need to probably go after a quarterback every single year. Doesn't necessarily have to be multiple guys, obviously, but you need to get a guy. So I mean, and yes, this speaks not only to Brent Venables, but also Jeff Lebby as a recruiter. He's come in a short period of time and has gotten Dylan Gabriel to come over, and has obviously gotten this 2023 Jackson Arnold. So I think you try to you try to read into this a little bit. There was some thoughts that Oklahoma was maybe in the mix a little bit for Arch Manning, another 2023 guy. Probably not the case now. There was some thoughts. I don't know if you read too much into this about what does that look like for for Dart possibly coming in, Jackson Dart possibly coming in as a transfer portal guy. It doesn't. I think Oklahoma would still obviously take him if he decides he wants to come to Oklahoma. But maybe it's one of those situations where it looks like Oklahoma may not feel super strong about their chances with Dart. So yeah, good. He reminds, looking at his film, Mark, reminds you a lot of Baker Mayfield, and just the way he kind of runs around a little bit, and the way his moxie in watching some of his film and stuff like that. So yeah, I think good compared to a great kid that you're going to get in Lebby's system, which is I think he thrives on dual threat quarterbacks. He's based on the system that they run. He's not really looking for just a pure drop back passer. So someone that has the ability to run around a little bit in that zone read, RPO, base offense that Oklahoma will integrate. So yeah, good get for Oklahoma to start solidifying that 2023 cycle a little bit. They've lost a few kids, but Venables and team is doing a really good job at getting out there and meeting with some of those, and getting into some of those schools, and talking to some of those 2023 kids and getting some of those offers out.
Jackson Arnold is the 72nd rated player in the country overall, and the 7th rated quarterback according to the 247 Sports Composite, number 14 in Texas, out of Denton, Texas. Certainly that Geyer High School in Denton, Texas produces a ton of college players at a high level. When you bring up Baker Mayfield, and I know you coach basketball and love other sports, what comes to mind is that everybody has their shooting style, batting style, throwing style, but there's just certain players that it just looks better, or maybe for some reason you just like it. A left-handed swing in baseball, like Ken Griffey Jr. He just looks like he swings the bat better than anybody. That sort of thing. Or Stephen Curry shooting the basketball. Baker Mayfield, when he really wants to rip a pass and he brings it back and then he uncoils, I just think that's a good look. I just like the way when he really wants to drill one in there, it's just a good look.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and he's Baker Mayfield goes probably by from a recency perspective, and I say recency over the last probably 15, 20, 25 years, is probably the most popular Oklahoma football player amongst fans, media, and all that. So yeah, just to be mentioned in that, and I've heard a couple of people mention him in that category with Jackson Arnold. So to be mentioned in that category is really good. I think the thing that we know from Oklahoma, one of the things that separated Baker Mayfield is his leadership ability. So, and that's something that obviously you look at from an intangible perspective as someone that can bring that leadership ability. And so, if he's able to do anything close to what Baker was able to do, then that'll be a win. In my mind, Baker's one of the probably top 3, top 5 on field leaders that you've seen. I mean, it's hard to go against the leadership that you saw from Tim Tebow, like day in and day out, each and every week. But yeah, no, that those intangibles are really good. Some of those players, it's hard to distinguish from a talent perspective, but the intangibles can be something that takes those kids to the next level.
Big Mad Mullet Sports is asking about Eric Majors or Marcus Majors, and whether he will step up and prove himself this year.
This is a guy that I think has the opportunity to take that number one, a running back job. I love the way he ran in the bowl game. He didn't get a whole lot of opportunities, so I think part of it's up to him. How much is he willing to go all in everything that he has to do, and meaning how committed is he going to be in the classroom to put himself in a position to be that starter and to be one of those guys that is the guy for Oklahoma this next year. Runs hard, very, very powerful runner. And I think the things that Oklahoma is going to be missing, when you look at Kennedy Brooks, is the vision, the cutback, and cutback ability, everything that he had. Kennedy Brooks was never the smallest, or never the strongest guy, never the fastest, never the most elusive, but he was really, really good at reading his blocks, really patient, and really understanding where the hole was supposed to be. And so that's going to be something that will be interesting to see play out, how Oklahoma is able to run the ball. But yeah, I think right now I would probably see, and I say right now we're 7 months away here, but I would think Marcus Major does have an opportunity to put himself in that position to be the number one guy come September next year.
179 folks online. We appreciate you being here for OU Sooners Live, and we appreciate all of your contributions in helping us grow this particular show and the channel as a whole. But this particular show, we had over 5,000 views for last week's show, so we appreciate it. But please hit the like button. We've only got 28 likes out of 179 online, and we keep in mind that with 179 online, we probably had 500 people come through already. So please hit the like button. Helps us. This is not something that massages Jason or my ego. Hitting the like button. We don't care how many likes there are, to be totally honest. This has everything to do with YouTube. They like the feedback of the likes, and then they use their algorithms to push the video into traffic. So if you got a video with 10,000 views that's got 1,000 likes, it's going to get pushed harder than a 10,000 view video that's got 10 likes. So there you go. So please help us in that way. Jason, Harold Perkins is a 5-star linebacker, the #1 rated linebacker in the country, according to 247 Sports. And he is just one of the waves of ridiculous talent that was initially coming to Texas A&M. But just a few weeks after he committed, he is decommitted from Texas A&M. So folks in the chat are asking and wondering whether Harold Perkins is anyone who could possibly make his way to Norman.
I've not heard a lot, Mark, in terms of Oklahoma's involvement with Harold Perkins. I've heard a lot of noise that Texas is probably Texas Longhorns are the team to beat for Perkins, and I think a lot of it is based on Oklahoma has 3 really solid linebackers coming into this cycle. When you're talking about Jaron Koenig, Kip Lewis, and Kobe McKenzie are 3 really solid guys for Oklahoma. So I would venture to guess that he's probably Texas bound, if not anywhere else. But I've not at this point heard any noise about Oklahoma kind of getting into that mix. But yeah, one of the best players in the country from a 2022 cycle. I think top 10, 15, somewhere around there overall. And as you mentioned, #1 linebacker in the country.
247 Sports has him #4.
4, yeah. Well, and there's been a lot of discussion about so Texas has done a really, really good job through obviously the recruiting cycle and the portal, and it's Nick Saban did a really good job of talking about this, about NIL and about recruiting, and heard a lot about him. He said that, fully supportive of NIL and thinks it's something that's obviously really good for the student athletes. But I think the part of it that he was concerned with, and I think the part of it that a lot of us across the country are concerned with, is NIL being used as a tool in recruiting, which it's turning out to be. And some of the things that I've been hearing about is, some of these transfers that Texas has been getting. It's a bidding war between Texas and whoever they're up against, and there's not a lot of, when you think about the financial side of it, and what kids can be offered. There's not a lot of programs in the country that can win a straight up financial resources battle against Texas. Outside, taking away out everything that they've not been able to do on the field, just from a resources and a money perspective, they've not. So if you get into a situation where Texas is in a bidding war, and that's what the kid is wanting not necessarily, what maybe makes the most sense for him personally, but more so where can I get the most incentives? Where can I get the most and the biggest or the best NIL deal? And Texas is absolutely loading up. It's going. I would, as much as if Sark throws out another 7-5 with the talent that they've got. I mean, they've always got talent, but they're going to be loaded just all across the board next year. So if he doesn't at least win 8 games, I think it'll probably be a pretty big disappointment for that program.
Once this NIL situation came together on July 1st of last year, and the Wild Wild West ensued after that, even Nick Saban was at a place where he said, you know what, don't ask me about NIL. This was at SEC Media Days. He said, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what this is going to look like. Ask me this question a year from now. Because we were all kind of throwing up our hands, and we had theories. I had all sorts of theories about it could have this impact, but it could be completely the opposite and do this. I have no idea. But I know it's going to go in one of these like 12 directions in different ways, but I don't know which. But two concerns that after letting it sink in for a couple of days to a couple of weeks that hit me seem to be coming to fruition. One of them, definitely. The first one is that the college decision being impacted by NIL. I would like to see the same rules and guidelines put in place that are put in place in regards to an athlete's contact with an agent before they turn pro, that they cannot contact or be contacted by NIL suitors before they choose a school. Sure, they can gather information and make an educated decision as to the NIL opportunities at various universities, but to be just flat out offered and sign an NIL deal, and that being the reason that they would choose a school, I just think that's not where we want to be. And then secondly, and this is going to be tougher to track and know, but where the NIL money is coming from private sources, the schools themselves now being able to, and I'm just conjecturing, instead of getting into trouble paying athletes directly, being able to kind of supplement or help NIL deals by channeling money through them to players. Those were my two concerns right out of the gate.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and I think neither of us are not too naive to know that the the universities they're not supposed to have a hand in it, but they absolutely will have a hand in it. I think the kid's name is Isaiah Nayer, the kid that transferred from Wyoming to Texas, and and I've heard from people that I trust that he was all set to go to Tennessee, and then Texas offered him something that Tennessee just couldn't match. And you look at a school like the University of Tennessee, going back to last week's conversation, a definite blue blood in college football. And if a team like Tennessee is not able to match, and it's just unfortunate, Mark, that's kind of where we are. And the NCAA, I mean, I think their hands are pretty much tied. There's not a whole lot they can do. The only policing, or the only, limitation of this probably has to be from a legislative perspective, which, I mean, who knows if that's going to happen. So, I mean, we're not officially in pay for play, but I think to some extent, we might as well be there at this point. So um, Oklahoma's in the game. Obviously, I think Oklahoma's being a lot more discreet about the way they're really approaching NIL. I think Oklahoma is really more. They want the kids that want to be at Oklahoma because that's where they want to be. Whether it's tradition, whether it's resources, whether it's facilities, whether it's they just love the school, whatever it is. I think that their approach that Oklahoma has right now is they want kids that want to be there for whatever reason. Yes, NIL can certainly be a part of it and stuff like that, but they're not looking for the kids that's their primary focus, is how much they're going to get paid before they even set foot on the campus, which is, I mean, I can kind of I get it to more of an extent, for kids that are a little bit more established within the program, have played a year or so, or are starting, at a high level school, a prominent starting position like quarterback, or, running back, or wide receiver, or something like that. But, giving these guys $100,000 deals before they've even set foot on campus is a little, it's just a little concerning, but it is what it is. So I guess we have to kind of embrace it to a certain extent.
It's almost like a lot of the recruiting violations that have become historic throughout the years, whether they be at USC or SMU or Miami or otherwise. And then you look back decades later because you just assume, okay, everybody's a Reggie Bush, where if the school, the football program, everybody involved was willing to put their necks on the line, their reputations and NCAA violations and money and everything on the line, then this kid's a stud and he's going to live up to the potential. But sometimes, most of the time, these historic recruiting violations throughout NCAA history involve players, and you're like, guy didn't turn out to be
Right.
anything, he was supposed to be, but did not turn out to be worth it in any such way. This is kind of, and we're going to see the same thing with NIL.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're banking on, their evaluation of the kid and what the potential might be. But there's going to be some times where they're gonna miss out. So it'll be very interesting for very briefly getting to Texas. Texas plays Alabama week 2, 2022. So we'll see exactly how good that roster and that team is early on.
Yeah. Uh, I think the roster potentially is up to the challenge of taking that game on, but until proven otherwise, my goodness, if we see the Texas product at what it was and it has been almost every season since 2011, my goodness, that's going to be an ugly game. We shall see. And I know a lot of people here are going to relish that. Trap House, thanks for being here. Appreciate you being here, as well as Roger Dodger. You both hit the like button. Thank you for letting us know that. Hopefully that encourages others to do the same. It's just bam, hit the like button. Also, let people know that we're here every Wednesday at 12:30 Eastern, 11:30 a.m. where it counts there in the Midwest. And yes, 11:30 a.m. Central every Wednesday. And let's get some more folks in here. We appreciate everybody helping us out. All right, I'm going to bring up the name that is going to engage like half the people, and then half the people are going to hate me for bringing it up. But these are reports that are just coming down in like the last hour or two concerning Caleb Williams, and one of the last teams I would have connected him to just because of style of play, and that's tremendous football program, but because of style of play, the University of Wisconsin.
It's a team, Mark, that I had heard, and this has been weeks and weeks ago when he initially hit the portal. I had heard that Wisconsin was potentially a team that could be in the mix a little bit, but I haven't heard anything about them. To your point about some of the late breaking stuff here with the in a while, and so I mean, I think Oklahoma fans would be overjoyed if that's if that's where he actually ended up going versus USC, of course. But I don't know. I mean, when you think about it's a. I mean, like you said, it's not a program that has had outside of Russell Wilson. They've not really had a great a great history of quarterback play within that school. In a long time, it's the method for them winning has been the same year after year for the last 20-25 years. Just outstanding defense, great offensive line, great running game, and just trying to do just enough in the passing game to to be able to survive. So obviously, if he chooses to go to Wisconsin, I think it gives them obviously a tremendous boost going into 2022 because not only the defense is always going to be there, the running game is probably always going to be there. Now you got a potential game changer at the quarterback position where I guess my only concern would be what does who does he have to throw it to? Do they have enough weapons on the outside at the wide receiver position to be able to have Wisconsin be in the same conversation as Michigan and Ohio State next year? At least Ohio State, because who knows if Harbaugh leaves, who knows what's going to happen with Michigan? But at least for Ohio State.
And even Russell Wilson came to Wisconsin pretty much as a ready-made quarterback, not to say that he learned nothing at Wisconsin, but he showed up as like the offensive player of the year in the ACC at North Carolina State and played all of his football at NC State. He just played 1 year at Wisconsin and took them to the Rose Bowl. So it's not like he developed at Wisconsin necessarily. So yeah, they do not have a history of developing quarterbacks. And they've got a 5-star in Graham Mertz, and he has not been good. He had more picks than TD passes last year again. And it just does not seem like a fit. And I know with a lot of teams and programs, their reputation gets dated in that we still think of them as being this and they really aren't, like the Big 12 in defense. I can still have college football conversations and people are like, the Big 12 defense is horrible and every game's 55-50. Okay, no, it's not. And you're 4 years, 5 years behind the times, but it's still. And with Wisconsin, yeah, that is not to say, when I bring up the style of play, that doesn't mean that they're lining up in the I formation every play and running some offense from 1985. Yeah, they've updated the offense, but still it has the base of the offense that they ran 10 years ago. They still want to run 70+% of the time. They've got a tremendous running back in Braylon Allen, who was only 17 years old last year and was a beast. And the great offensive lines, and that's still their identity. That's who they are. It's almost like watching Michigan. They've updated their offense with some creativity, but their core is still, we're going to have a tight end. He's going to be very heavily involved, and we'll even put a fullback on the field, and that's who they are. So yeah, that strikes me as an odd match.
It does, and Mark, I think one of the things that that he was, at least from his father's perspective, but I think there, Caleb Williams' camp is he wants to be in a place where they feel like he can be developed in such a way that when he decides to enter the draft, then he's ready to play immediately. And so Wisconsin is a place where not that they don't have good offensive coaching or, good quarterback coach, there at Wisconsin, but it's not a school that, you would immediately look at and say, okay, this is where you go, if you want to be a future NFL quarterback, is the University of Wisconsin, right? So, it'll be interesting to see if that comes to fruition. I would think, Mark, and a lot of these guys, even for even for Jackson Dart or any of these transfer guys, so they've got to be in place by February 1st if they want to compete in spring ball. So I would think, I say this every week, but I would think by this time next week we have a better idea of where some of those kids are going. Just because, especially if you're a quarterback, you want to get you want to get acclimated to your new teammates. You want to get yourself involved in spring ball and things like that. So it puts you behind the 8 ball, so to speak. I mean, let's be honest, Caleb Williams is going to start if he comes in the spring or the summer. He'll be the guy. But I think at the end of the day, to be as good as you want to be and to put him, put yourself in a position to challenge Ohio State and be, one of those teams in the Big Ten, or if it's USC, be one of those teams in the Pac-12. You really want to, you would think that these kids would make those decisions here pretty soon in the next few days.
We've got an Iowa channel, do an Iowa show on Tuesday at 4:30 Central. If anybody wants to check it out, I bring that up because our Iowa guy, Corey Brad, is probably going to go through the roof when he sees that Wisconsin is going after Caleb Williams, because Iowa, for as good as the team is, they're a really good team. It's all special teams and defense. Their offense is horrific, and they're just standing pat with like the 120th offense in the country by any metric, and seem to be not interested in any transfer quarterbacks, even though like there have been 15 in the transfer portal that are better than their starter. They just are standing pat. So we shall track the Caleb Williams to Wisconsin, of course. That should be fascinating. I would be intrigued by that match. All right. We got Jason here. Jason, anything in particular that you've got going there? Last word on college football?
So, we're kind of in our transition between the end of the season and then spring ball right now. So there's a lot of, we've got a lot of stuff kind of previewing spring, looking at some of the coaching moves across the country, not necessarily just Oklahoma or anything like that. But so a lot of that as we look at kind of getting back into the spring ball mix, which is here pretty soon with workouts starting and all that stuff, and here in the spring.
Cody Johnson has asked a few times, I think a few others as well. Do we know anything about Devin Campbell?
So he's still between Oklahoma and Texas. Texas has had the lead for quite some time. I haven't really heard anything new other than the fact that he is going to announce on signing day. So next week is when we'll hear when we'll hear about Campbell. So uh, I think Texas still probably has a little bit of an edge still for Campbell, but wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma gets in there, just because of the fact that I think he himself is really kind of pro Oklahoma, but I think some of his family seem to be a little bit more pro Texas, and I think Oklahoma's got probably 7 or 8 guys that they're still guys that they're talking to, interested in adding for this 2022 cycle. Devin Campbell is one. We talked a little bit about offensive lineman Josh Connerly last week. Had an official visit to Oklahoma. Heard that it went well. Like I said, we talked about him. He's a guy that's probably not going to commit until maybe March, April timeframe. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. How much are you willing to wait on him versus some other guys that are more willing to commit early on. Oklahoma got some really good news a couple of days ago, actually yesterday, from Gentry Williams. He has reconfirmed his commitment to Oklahoma. Had an official visit this past weekend with Oklahoma. Really vibed very well with Jay Valai. Liked where Oklahoma was going from that. So he's completely shut down anything else and has reconfirmed his commitment to Oklahoma, which is good. And everything that I've heard, that it was on that trajectory, but good to see him publicly kind of come out and talk through that. Cavante Henry's another guy, linebacker, came in for a visit just recently. Has been very pro Oklahoma via Twitter. Another linebacker, so he's a guy that I think Oklahoma's very strong with right now. A couple of our Mason Thomas is a kid linebacker that has been committed to Iowa State that Oklahoma kind of got in late. So I think he's a guy that Oklahoma's still in on. Ahmad Moten is another guy, a defensive lineman that Oklahoma's a couple of 3-star guys, a little bit like under the radar type kids that obviously aren't some of the top 50, top 100 recruits, but people that Oklahoma's really liked from an evaluation perspective. Oklahoma, the previous staff wasn't really in on, and Todd Bates and some of the new regime there from a coaching perspective is there. And then a couple of other guys. Grayson Halton is a guy that it was really kind of rumored that he may pull the trigger and commit to Oklahoma, defensive lineman guy. He's taking another he talked to Dan Lanning a couple of days ago. He's actually taking another visit to Oregon this next weekend, but he'll be making his commitment here next week as well on National Signing Day. And then Jamarion Hurt is a wide receiver, a 3-star guy who Oklahoma's also in on. So I think that's about 7 or 8 guys that Oklahoma that I've mentioned. Oklahoma has 10 transfer portal guys that they're in. So when you talk about the 17 commitments already, plus those 10 portal guys, they're getting to the point where where they're maybe not completely full, but they're being a little bit more choosy on who they offer, who they go after, because I think I mentioned this a couple of times that Oklahoma's probably in the neighborhood of adding between portal and other 30 to 35 guys through that process. So it'll be interesting to see what Oklahoma does. But I think obviously the offensive linemen, Connerly and Campbell are a couple of guys to watch, as well as really those last 4 that I mentioned are Mason Thomas, Ahmad Moten, Grayson Halton, and then Jamarion Burt.
As D-Rock Irish mentions here in the chat, Derek Mason, Auburn defensive coordinator this past season, has signed with Oklahoma State. Of course, that impacts OU in a sense, in which you would expect their defensive prowess there with the Cowboys to remain, with Jim Knowles moving to Ohio State. But Derek Mason has been highly successful as a defensive coordinator in the past at Stanford before getting the Vanderbilt head coaching job and moving on to Auburn for 1 year. Also, keep in mind, folks, that 1 week from today, we will be in the midst of National Signing Day. Of course, that is not anything close to what it's been in the past in regards to most of the work being completed on December 15th, but we still may have some interesting news and notes, and maybe even if not any direct Oklahoma signees, but certainly a lot of movement and tracking across the country and in the Big 12.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Oklahoma they'll have a few. The extent of how many I don't know, but Oklahoma will have a few. And then, and to your last point, that's a great get for Oklahoma State. Jim Knowles has done a tremendous job in turning that defense around at Oklahoma State over the last couple of years. Obviously, by Ohio State coming and pulling him out, I think the challenge for Mason is going to be Oklahoma State has had a bit of a mass exodus on the defensive side of the ball in terms of transfers and graduation and early enrollees into the draft. So it's not a complete rebuild, but I think it pains a lot of people to hear that around here. But that's a really good ad for Oklahoma State. Very, very respected guy among the business, and then he's done a really good job everywhere he's been from a defensive side perspective. I mean, it's so difficult. I don't really blame really much of what happened to Vanderbilt. It's so incredibly difficult to win at a program like that. One of the toughest jobs, one of the toughest Power 5 jobs in the country, just in terms of the lack of support for their athletic program. But no, he did had a few winning seasons, got the Commodores to a bowl game a couple of times. So really, really a respected guy in the business. So I think he'll do a good job at Oklahoma State.
I am stunned and shocked that we have Texas and Oklahoma fans fighting in the live chat. That just never happens.
No,
so,
not at all. Not at all.
It seems like Texas and Oklahoma fans are willing to fight every day of the year. So
about
this
anything,
is the place to do it.
Literally anything.
So they are going at it right now. Unfortunately, I had to block somebody. So let's not let it get out of hand and be attacking people and going through profanity streams. Okay. So regardless, we'll be here next Wednesday, National Signing Day. Oklahoma may be in the mix. Jason believes there could be a couple signings next to Wednesday. So join us back here. Please bring your friends, family, anybody that you know that loves college football, not even Oklahoma. Of course, that's our focus, but the Big 12 and college football right here, the voice of college football. Jason Ray, last word on college football, makes it all happen. Jason, we appreciate you being here as always.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Mark. Appreciate it.
We will see everybody else soon. There were a number of comments and questions here in the last 10 or 15 minutes. Keep in mind, we've got about 200 on the line, and most of you weren't here throughout the last hour. So a lot of the comments and questions coming in dealt with what we discussed early in the show. So just wait for the video to post. It should do almost immediately, certainly in the next 10 to 15 minutes, and check out the portion of the show that you missed. And we'll see you all back here next Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. Central Time.